Welcome to the Talking AI podcast, where we talk AI with both experts in the field and early adopters. I'm your host, Matt Page, and we're here to demystify AI for you so you can get some value from it. Let's talk some AI. We have engineers on our team who haven't written a single line of code in 3 months. And a year ago, that would have gotten somebody fired, but now it might mean that they're the most productive person on your team. Agents and agentic approaches are completely changing what it even means to be an engineer, how we build, how we think, and honestly, how we define the role itself. And I got the perfect guest to talk about this with me because Zach Lloyd is the former principal engineer at Google, former CTO at Self-Made and Time, and is now the founder and CEO of Warp, an agentic development environment built for this new era. Welcome to Talking AI.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we may show some of this off. So for those just listening, you may want to catch this on YouTube. But Zach, it feels like we've crossed some threshold towards the end of last year. And maybe it was Opus 4.6 or Codex 5.3, maybe just the agentic tools maturing. But the actual act of building software just looks completely different now. How would you describe that shift that we're experiencing like in real time?
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that the timing you have is right. I think if you were to look back, I don't know, a year ago, you would start to see AI really changing workflows, but it was primarily with things like autocomplete, and you'd still be in your code editor looking at code, and you'd have these cool assistive features where, AI would sort of complete your thought. In the middle of last year, it started changing to more like you just prompt your computer asking it to make changes for you. This was things like Cloud Code or Warp has this ability as well. And it started to change the workflow where you could start everything with a prompt, but you probably wouldn't be able to finish it. And then I would say towards the end of last year, like your timing is right. The underlying models, I think you picked the right two ones with Opus 4.6 and Codex 5.3, have gotten to the point where it's like, you really don't need to write code. You still need to like understand code as a developer. But if you're handwriting code, you're either kind of doing something wrong or it's like you're working on a really hard big code base. Like there's some circumstance where you're not doing like straight down the line engineering because I think for the most part, even on like pretty hard code bases, as long as you're guiding the agent, you can have it actually like write most of the code for you right now, which is wild. It's like sci-fi.
Yeah, it is crazy. And, you'd see these people online that would like zero, single shot, some app that exists in the world. And it was kind of a joke because it was just a front end. But today,
Yeah.
like, it's just a different experience. Like, as I was playing around with Warp before this episode, like, it goes through the step of actually planning what you're going to build. Like, it truly feels like the experience of working with another engineer. Like you're aligning on, okay, well, what do we want to build? What about these features? What about this tech stack? Before you even get started. And then it just goes. And like you, the
Yes.
human, continue to be a feedback loop, but it's like the agents are a feedback loop onto themselves in a sense as well. Uh, but like, what's the common? This is like the new emerging workflow where people are spinning up these multiple agents. And I think that bit is foreign still to a lot of people where you have agents working in parallel. Like,
Yeah.
how does that work? How are engineers leveraging that? Like, what's this new kind of working model with building today?
Yeah. So in today's world, the way that developers are working is, I would say, primarily with agents like on their laptop, like kind of local agents. You will do pretty much what you said. So the way that I work is like I will pick some task I want to accomplish. Maybe
Mm.
it's fixing a bug, maybe it's building a small feature. I will start like a planning process with an agent. Sometimes you can just straight up ask the agent to do something, and if it's simple enough, the agent will just do it. I like to work with the agent to understand what it's going to do and
Mhm.
how it's going to do it, and make sure it's right. Because there are still, if you don't do that step and you're working on a complicated code base, and I'm mostly working on Warp, which is like a million lines of Rust, the agent will still often do things and they'll kind of seem right, but when you look under the hood and you go to send like a code review to a teammate, it'll be it'll be wrong. They'll like, it used to be that they would like delete tests or like make them trivially like they'll do stupid things to try to get to the outcome that you've described. So I would spend time planning and then I'll launch the agent. And then, it's now the case that the agents can run 10, 20, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. Like if you start to get longer than that, I start to worry about the agent going in circles or losing context, which is still a
Yeah.
major problem with these agents. But if you have something that's running for that long, you're probably going to want to go do another one and then maybe even another one. And so at any given time, my workflow these days is like working on with 3 or 4 agents. I'm like, it's actually like very taxing on me as an engineer to
Mm.
like keep track of what they're all doing, making sure
Yeah.
they're doing sensible stuff. It's taxing on my laptop. Like, I'm like spinning the CPU and like, I have a whole bunch of checkouts. So it's like a weird new workflow where I'm trying to juggle agents is kind of where we're at
Mhm.
today. I think that's going to change this year. I think it's going to evolve again, but that's
So,
today's workflow.
and you mentioned that point
Yeah.
around because people are doing this locally, they're spinning up a bunch of agents. And while
Yeah.
one agent's working on something, you have another one working on something else. But I think that's the interesting point I hadn't really thought much about is just the taxing nature on your actual machine, right? And you see like the hot thing now is open cloud stuff like that. You go buy a bunch of Mac
Yeah.
Minis, but those are
Yeah.
also very expensive. And I think that's a nuance with Warp and then Oz with your building. It's almost like agents in the cloud in a sense versus having them always be on your local machine. But like, what's you mentioned that shift happening? Like, where do you
Yeah.
see that happening, and what do you foresee coming?
So I think 6 months from now, and keep in mind, it's hard to predict because this stuff is just changing so
Yeah, there's no
quickly.
telling.
But I think there's a very strong pull to move agentic development off of people's local computers.
Mhm.
There's a strong pull from like the individual perspective where, once you're running 3 or 4 of these, it's hard to do other stuff. Like you literally are running the limits of your laptop. Are you going to buy a Mac Mini? Like you're not going to keep scaling your individual compute by buying more computers. I think that's like a crazy model. What you're going to
Right.
do is be like, how do I take advantage of the fact that there's all this cloud compute in the world? And you're going to, as an individual, want to run agents doing like workflows on cloud machines. As a company, you're definitely going to want this because right now it's very hard to see what agents are doing when they're running locally. It's very hard to like make sure they're secure. It's hard to like compound the knowledge of an organization if every time an agent does something that like trail of what it did just kind of disappears into the ether. Um, and so there's a big, I think there's a bunch of pull, and we're seeing this with what we just launched, Oz, for companies to sort of like pull these workflows off of laptops into the cloud. And then there's just some other functional reasons why you want these things in the cloud, which is like agents are going to be running off of triggers like timers or like system events, like, hey, your server crashed. And that kind of has to, by its nature, run on some cloud machine. It just doesn't make sense for that to run locally when the trigger is something that's in the cloud. So my prediction is that, through things like Oz, these workflows will move into the cloud. I don't think they'll move entirely into the cloud. There's still like nice reasons to do things locally, but more and more of it's going to move into the cloud this year. And it's going to be like orchestrated and auditable. And like these things are going to be more like cloud team members than just, you interacting with them locally.
Yeah, and it does have that vibe. I forget who said it, but it's almost equating to like you're going from individual contributor to like an engineering manager, and now you're having to like
Yes.
delegate these tasks out. And there's that element of like, you know, you got to let go in a sense in terms of like, okay, you got to trust their judgment that they're going to do the right thing. You still oversee them and whatnot, but you can't always get to looking at and inspecting every line of code, which like I'd be curious, like, do we abstract away to where like engineers actually getting that nuance into the code base goes away to an extent, or would that always exist as we just scale and start moving exponentially faster?
It's an awesome question. So, yeah, like I think the question is something like, will today's code become the same. Well, the same thing happened to like what happened with assembly language. So it used to be
Yeah.
that developers, would look at assembly language and like that level of abstraction is gone except for the most specialized people. I think uh something like that will happen with a lot of code, to be honest. You will you'll just think in higher and higher levels of abstraction. You'll think in terms of the systems and the architecture and like the stack and the services that you're using. Like if you're doing development, like that's like where I'm operating now a lot of the time when I'm working with agents. And that stuff's not easy, by the way. That's like stuff that you learn through a long
Yeah.
career of being an engineer. So it's going to be interesting to see how people change their approach to like learning how to build systems, because that's the fundamental skill now, not the code writing. We're not there yet. Like everything that an agent writes right now still gets like a human code review, and I would
Mhm.
recommend doing that just because there's so many ways that agents can do things incorrectly. But I don't know. I think it's definitely where we're trending is that you're not looking at code, which is
Yeah.
crazy to say, but yeah, that's where
Totally.
we're
And I
trending.
think the
Yep.
context piece is critical too. But I want to hit this first. Like
Yep.
the user interface itself, the UX and UI of it, like what's your thoughts on where this is going? How are you thinking about it at Warp? Because you have everything from Lovable, which is and Bolt, which are, fully web based. It's like this nice user interface. It's kind of abstracting and doing everything for you. You're not really getting into the
Yep.
code. You have Cloud Code, which is more silly, command line terminal based. You have Codex, the app that they just came out with, which is like
Yep.
something in between.
In
Um,
between. Yeah.
what do you think is the future? What is Warp, and like how are you thinking about like the design of how humans interact in this new way?
Yeah. It's an awesome question. So historically, Warp has been a modern terminal. Like that's what the company we our first product was. It was like, can we modernize and improve the user experience around the terminal? Can we make it work for teams? We have, my attitude on this these days is like Warp's an agentic development environment. It's grown out of the terminal. That's like agentic development environment is, interestingly enough, that's a term that we coined. I think that is catching on as like a category. The way that I think about it is we want to build a tool that is most suited for the new workflow. And the new workflow is around prompting. And then increasingly, it's going to be around sort of like having a control plane for what all your agents are doing, whether you've directly prompted them or they're running off some system event, whether they're the back end for some app, they're an automation, etc. So I think you want like the interface in the future is going to look very much like you can see what all of your agents are doing. You can see what contexts they have. You can see who launched them. You can see what PRs and artifacts they've produced. And then if you need to, you can jump in and like, get personal with them. So you can like, take over the code, you can iterate with them. And so I think there's like a sort of control plane interface that everyone's going to have. And that's kind of like what we've been leading into with Oz, which is actually decoupled from the Warp terminal. And then I think there's a place where, if you want to actually do a tight iteration loop, it's going to look more like, it's going to look like probably the I don't think it's look like the IDE. I don't think you need the code editor. I think it's gonna look mostly like a terminal, but with some features that are, sort of built for the agentic workflow, like being able to quickly look at diffs or look at your file tree
Mhm.
and stuff like that. So I think that's what Warp is tending towards right now is like a really good interface for doing this tight loop prompting with agents.
Yeah, I saw something. It was today. It was Cloud Code. They have something called remote control, where you can basically interface with the agent on your mobile phone while it's still working in your local environment. And like, I think Spotify engineers, they talked about something similar where they were like interacting on the train. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering if there will be this other element too, which, this form factor that is, and that probably won't be the typical thing where somebody's on the go doing this, but you could, right? You have your
Yep.
agents kind of working and you're conversating with them um, through different form factors. And I think voice is the other element too. Like, I don't know about you, but my
Totally.
default now is Whisper Flow or whatever. That's I've kind of just normalized around that. But it's tough for me to make that transition. But I think that's what's your thoughts on the other elements of like inputs and things like that? Because it's becoming very conversational, I feel like in some ways.
100%. So we Whisper Flow is built into Warp, which is cool. So
Oh, cool.
it's you can just hit the microphone button, or once you do that once, you can hold down a hotkey, and that's how I prompt. I just find it
Yeah.
so much more efficient than typing long prompts. So I'm 100% with you on voice. And then Warp has that same feature that Claude Code has, and we've had it for a long time. It's frustrating. It's actually annoying to me to see Claude Code launching
Yeah.
that. The PM on Claude Code used to work at Warp,
Oh, you're kidding.
and no, I'm serious. He was kind of poached by Anthropic, and so now they're launching it. But we've had that for a long time, where you can take any local session in Warp, grab a link to it, and then open it up on your phone. You can do that from a local session, or I think what's really useful and actually a better feature is you can do that from Cloud Session. So anything from Oz, you can grab a link to it, and it's all behind access control too. So it's like you can share it with your team. You can have multiple people from your team observing agents work, and I do think that's part of the future. It's like you can launch agents on your phone. Like you could be playing golf and having agents running. Um, it's they're just going to become more like these things that are constantly working, which is,
Yeah.
again, it's like a crazy sci-fi thing, but that is really what's going to happen.
So, okay, you just triggered me to kind of go down another rabbit hole, but the competitive landscape right now, like you're
Yep.
literally in the space competing with Anthropic, OpenAI, the other hot vibe coding tools, Lovable, um, Bolt, all of those. Like, what does that competition look like? Because y'all been around for a decent amount of time. Like, any insight into what it's like, literally like competing with
Sure.
these giants?
Yeah, so I mean we're doing well. We have our own sort of angle on things, which is it's really the differentiating thing is like the tight terminal integration that we
Mhm.
have. Um just to like lay out the competitive landscape a bit. So I wouldn't say we compete much with like Lovable and Bolt. So we are
Yeah, you're more
more of a
engineering
tool. Yeah, we're
focused
more of a
right now.
tool for like professional engineers. We also get a lot of professional, like just knowledge workers, which is interesting, but it's more
Mhm.
professional use cases. So we do get like PMs and data, like people working on data teams and like, but it's almost all business use cases. Um, we do compete with like Cursor, Claude Code, Codex. The by far the hardest thing for us there is not just that they're like bigger brands, which they are, but specifically for like the model providers who also are in the coding app space, they just can offer a much less expensive product. And so, to get people to pay for Warp, we really have to prove that the product is more useful. And for a lot of people, it is. Like people still pay us. We're growing very quickly, but like the sort of like amount of pure AI usage that you can get from like your Claude Max subscription or your Codex, your ChatGPT subscription is higher than what you can get with Warp. Um, and so the way that we are positioning more and more is to sort of be complementary to these tools. So you can run them within Warp. Like a lot of people will run Claude Code or Codex within Warp, and that's still like that's a cool place to be for us. Like we're in the sort of value chain of like people building stuff with AI. We are for orchestration in particular, we are going to be supporting like orchestrating with any of these other tools as well. And so,
Mhm.
going more towards the enterprise orchestration market, I think is a better spot for us to be. But it's a super competitive space. The other like I will say two other competitive dynamics I think are like good for us in the long run is like one, I think it's just a gigantic market. Like
Totally. You can
the
ride
the
that
type
that
of
natural
thing
wave. Yeah.
like in like it's expanding market super quickly.
Yeah.
Like who can build with Warp or Claude Code is like expanding rapidly. It's kind of like the Uber app in a sense of like, you know, people are not going to be buying vertical SaaS in the way they were. They're going to be using
Yeah.
a tool like Warp to build their vertical SaaS. So you really want to be on the side of like, are you an app that enables other people to build apps rather than just like being an app? So I feel very good about our position there. And then I do think these cost dynamics will change over time. So right
Totally.
now, you really need to be using like, if you want the best result, it's like Opus 4.6 or Codex 5.3. And my hope is that Google enters with like a more competitive coding model. Um, but I don't think that's going to be the case for very long. Like I think you're going to be able to use it like an open weight model and get the same quality of performance. And for a lot of coding tasks, you just won't need to be at the frontier like for much
Hmm.
longer. And that's going to dramatically change the cost structure and hopefully get us back to a point where the best product wins
Yeah.
rather than the cheapest product wins, which is kind of, a little bit what's happening right now.
Yeah, it is interesting when anybody can build anything. The
Yeah.
competitive, the positioning, the strategy element, distribution, all of that just becomes even more important. But the other point you mentioned too is interesting. Like the lines of what it means to be an engineer are blurring. Like you talked about product
Yes.
people being in there doing things. We have that in our company. Like they're in, Cursor and other tools doing things, right? So that's kind of
Totally.
blending over too, which just again expands the base of potential users that use a tool like this. And I'm gonna I'll pull up, just show you what I built with Warp, and for those listening, we'll try to be descriptive. But I was using Oz, I believe. So this is the new platform, and like you said, like
Yep.
there's a lot of people using this. It was actually foreign to me when I first heard about it. So I first came into the environment, and for whatever reason, whenever I test out a new tool, I always default to like make a to-do list app. I don't know why. It's like the first thing I
It's like
vibe
it's
coded.
the
So
hello world of agents. Is
exactly,
the
like
to-do
it's
list
a
app. Yeah.
CRUD based thing with a user interface. But I basically was conversating with it and told it to build it, and it was like talking through the stack and everything. And I basically was like, do whatever you think's best. So built a plan. Uh, I worked with the agent and built it out, and then I had to do this kind of cool Apple, liquid
Oh, this
glass
looks
kind of
nice.
vibe. And like, so, build a to do list app on Warp, and like all this stuff, it just like natively did like the date, and, I can put these like different categories and things. You can add the task, but it's got this neat little, kind of like I said, the liquid glass kind of vibe, but it's, I had like maybe 20 minutes before the podcast, and I was like, oh crap, I gotta test this out before we go try it. And it's just mind blowing to me. And I'm a bit unique. Like I'm not an engineer by trade, but I understand how
Yep.
systems work. I used to work in data analytics with a team of data scientists. So I understand how these things work, but I never crossed over into that world of I am coding. But I mean, like I always wanted to, but then this transition that happened just like opened this whole new world for me. And I still think there's so many people that don't even realize this is a possible thing, which is crazy.
Totally. We're still early adopters, I think, for this type of thing that you just did right here. I mean, and it's just gonna grow. And like I this is like a bold prediction that's out there, but I actually think that like something like Warp or Cloud Cowork or like that's gonna be the interface that knowledge workers use for a lot
Hmm.
of stuff rather than using all of these like individualized SaaS apps. It's just
Yeah.
gonna be like a personal agent control plane, which is pretty cool. That's where we're headed.
Yeah. I mean, we've started doing some of that. I think there's nuance between like, oh, I can go build a CRM now. Well, should you really go build a CRM? Maybe not. But
No,
like, if there's nuanced cases within your organization that are unique to you, that's not worth either going and buying something off the shelf or it doesn't really exist. Like, it's just so easy to do that now.
yeah, like for instance, so we're automating a ton of stuff with Oz. And so
Yeah.
I can just give you some examples. I can even show you. It's like we're automating all of our like social listening, which is like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
had a SaaS product for that, but it was like the SaaS product wasn't very good. It didn't have any
Mhm.
intelligence. It was and like the way that should work is you just like run an agent that looks at what everyone's saying about you and like comes up with a report, keeps a memory of it so you can see trends over time. At any given moment, I can ask the agent to do analysis on it. I don't have to worry about like, is this SaaS tool building like a graph UI for me? If I want to do a graph on our social listening, I ask the agent to build me a graph and it builds me a graph.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
crazy.
it's just this like you can ask the agent to do things mentality. It's a big mindset shift actually. Um, but it's just a different way of doing knowledge work where rather than reaching for an app, you reach for an agent who is more like a smart assistant. OpenClaw is obviously in this space for like personal stuff, but it's like you just are like, okay, I just want an agent that does this. And I actually think coding agents are like a huge part of this because a lot of the capabilities that you want an agent to have are just like writing code on the fly.
Yeah,
So I think the whole world's going to change.
totally. If you want to show anything off, feel free to pull it up. But it, the one other thing too, and I always say this, like context is the most important thing. I feel like with sufficient
Yep.
context, you can do almost anything. But I saw this really interesting. It was actually some kind of video series or something. This guy was talking about this paper, and it was actually a research study showing that your, Claude.md or your
Yeah.
agent.md, like these
I'm
markdown
following
files,
this.
are you okay? They can be counterproductive, and
Yeah.
it's like interesting. I'll pull this up while we're talking through it for the YouTube audience. I saw this the other day. And I was like, oh, I should talk to Zach about this. But for context, those markdown files, it allows you to give the agents context for your project, how you like to approach things, really whatever you want to do, and it uses that for context. But it goes in a bit of hierarchy where there's like the ultimate system prompt for whatever tool you're using. Then this kind of comes next, and then whatever task you're doing. But what it shows is it overall it can be about 20% more expensive because it's taxing the tool in terms of tokens and whatnot. And then the other piece is the fact that it can actually steer it in the wrong way. And like the perfect example the person gave is like, if I say, don't think about purple elephants, what are you thinking about right now? Purple elephants,
Picturing a
right?
purple elephant. Yeah.
Exactly. So like the models kind of work in the same way. Like you can tell it not to do something. It can sometimes have a counterproductive effect. But I'm curious your take on this, maybe skills, context in general. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, this result doesn't shock me, to be honest. It's like the way to think of context is it's kind of like a zero sum type situation. So, these things have like a finite amount of context that you can put in them. And if you're putting a bunch of context that's like kind of generic, and a lot of it is being agent generated, where it's like people will run like a slash init command, and Warp has this, and we may get rid of it, where it's like the agent will like add a bunch of generic stuff about your project. Like this is a TypeScript project, and it's like that's just sitting there wasting space in the context
Yeah.
window. So that makes sense to me that it's like wasteful. Um, and context is the sort of like the most precious resource that these agents have. Like when they go wrong, and they go wrong all the time, in my experience, because they're either like forgetting, meaning like stuff's been pushed out of the context window or summarized away, or they just are like missing stuff that like a human would know, and it makes them do things that appear to be dumb. So it makes sense to me. Like if you're gonna put something in the context window, you should be pretty careful about it. And these things like agents.md or cloud.md tends to just be like a lot of fluff because it's agent generated and it's not useful. The better approach is definitely skills. It's just basically context on demand. Like,
Yeah,
so I would just
totally.
think of it as like use tool calls.
Well,
And
detail
so,
what skills are
yeah,
for the audience because I think a lot of people hear about this and they don't know what it is, how to use it. Like just conceptually break that down maybe for the audience.
yeah. So a skill is also a markdown file, just as text. It can also like reference other sort of resources that could be programs. It could be more markdown files. And the key thing about skills is like, think of them as like an index that your agent knows about. So your agent, when it's running, will know that you might have like a skill for sending a Slack message. And sending a Slack message might involve like setting up a bunch of authentication and making an API request and all this stuff. The agent doesn't always need to know how to do all that stuff. It just needs to know that that exists, so that at the moment that the agent goes, is hitting some path where the user says something where it's like time to send a Slack message, it can then go look up, oh, okay, here's how I send a Slack message. And so that stuff isn't sitting there wasting your context all the time. It's more like retrieved on demand, which is in general the way that I think you want these agents to work, is just like retrieve on, it's like look up what you need to do, and the moment you need to do it, don't always like keep that in your memory. So that's a skill.
Yeah, it's funny. I've always seen people using these different markdown files, not skills specifically. And I always struggle with, it's like, what do I put in this thing that I'm okay with always being there? And I just never did it. So it was
Yeah.
interesting kind of seeing that study uh, on the back end. But yeah, the skills are super valuable, interesting. To the point you mentioned, it can kind of be on demand. It's
Yeah.
taxing the system uh, all the time. They kind of just, if it seems like a valuable skill to use, then it goes into the skills markdown file and then figures out how to use it essentially.
Yeah. I mean, if I could share for a second, I can
Yeah, go
show
for it.
some skill stuff. I think that might be interesting. So,
Totally.
um, I'll bring up Oz here. And so Oz, can you see my screen? Okay.
Yeah, we see the agents from your environment in the top left.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a piece of Oz, and one of the things that Oz lets you do is run skills in the cloud and run them on timers. And so like a good example of a skill here is this fraud checking skill. So Warp has a bunch of people who are trying to abuse our free AI tier. And so we've kind of automated part of detecting these usage patterns. We've done it through a skill. So if I go look at this skill, the skill is actually just a markdown file here in a skill.md. Um, you basically give it a prompt. It's kind of like a system prompt for the task. And then you can go and see how this skill runs. And I could go in here and I could basically go and filter down by that skill. So I do think skills are very useful for like encapsulating knowledge, and they're one of the key primitives that we are sort of leaning into. The other thing, just so people get what they're looking at for anyone who's watching, is like Oz gives you a sort of system-wide, company-wide view of all of the things that agents are doing across your company. So these are agents that my teammates are running. So like here's like Harry on our team is running an agent to fix a bug in Warp.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. You can see actually like the PR. I think I'm not going to be sharing that tab, but it's like I could see the PR, I could see the branch, I could even go and I will share this tab just so you can see it. I'm gonna have to log in. Probably not worth it, but I could show you the actual session where this agent did the work in the cloud. And so this is
And
kind
you
of what
can
I mean
see
by like
that because it's all cloud based. It's not local on
because
somebody else's machine,
yeah,
right?
exactly. I'll log in real quick so you can see what it looks like when you look at one of
So
these
while you're going
runs.
through
Yeah,
that, what I was just showing a second ago, was that Warp or was that? I don't think I was in Oz then. Now that I'm looking at this
you weren't.
platform.
So uh, Oz Oz is really this control plane
Uh-huh.
where you can see all of the agent runs and manage them. And it's also like a programming interface. So one of the cool things about Oz is that you can use it. I'll show you some other use cases actually while we're waiting here. Let me share a bit more if that's cool.
Yeah, totally. I'm like logging into Oz right now. Created
So
image. This is cool.
Oz is this is, can you see my screen right now?
Yes. Warp
So this is
with two
Warp.
panes.
Sorry. So Warp itself is like this ADE, which functions a lot like a terminal. And I could do what you were doing in here, where Oz is the name of the agent that we use within Warp, and I could ask it to like do stuff. I could be like, describe the PR I'm working on. I'll make this a little bit bigger. But what's also cool is like I can directly from Warp, I can do things like I can launch agents into the cloud. And so this is where you really get, I think, into the cool stuff of getting these things off of your laptop. So I could be like, count the lines of TypeScript in this repo. And I'm launching basically a cloud environment here. I'll launch this and you'll see that it will actually sort of like run it up into the cloud. And then if I'm working in this manner as opposed to the local manner, and I go back to um, this, I should see this session that I'm running right here. So this count, the one that I just like launched, is now something that is accessible in the cloud and viewable by the team and tracked. So Oz integrates into Warp, but the real sort of magic that we're going for here is like, how do you let companies sort of track everything that's happening across all of their agents in the cloud? How do you store all their artifacts? How do you make sure all these conversations get stored? And so, it's integrated into Warp, but it's not tightly coupled into Warp, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, this is cool. I'm glad you actually showed this. This is kind of what you're talking about with that new, um, it's kind of a new way of, it's both like the UX and the way of working and all these things are different in a sense because you're working with these different agents that are doing different tasks and you want some kind of auditability or ability to check into them.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's
Yeah, like this ran on a cloud machine, but I'm able to see it exactly as though it ran in Warp. I could take it over here and continue it locally, but this is what allows you to scale agents off of your laptop. And then you can do really cool things like with this, where you can run these programmatically, which is another sort of big part of it here. So I could, through a CLI or through an API, I can also launch an agent here, and this agent will run in the cloud. And what's cool about this is like, again, the way these agents are going to work in the future is they're going to be like triggered in the cloud. They're going to be programmable. And so we tried to design our sort of cloud agent system in such a way that it's fully programmable and flexible, which is a really important thing for enterprises that are trying to adopt these cloud agents. So this one eventually also will show up as like a thing in my Oz repo here. Yeah, let me stop sharing for a sec.
and while you're doing
How
that,
do
let me
I?
ask you this.
Yeah, yeah,
So we have, multiple agents doing these different things. Talk to me about the concept of having agents that are orchestrating other agents, when you should do that. Like it's almost this new agent design in a
yeah,
sense. Any thoughts on that?
yeah. Tons of thoughts on that. So there's two types of scenarios that I think are important to solve right now with agents that I consider to not be totally solved. And that's like, one is like doing very long, sort of single threaded tasks where the agents are like forgetting stuff as they go. And so that's not really solved right now, or not solved super well. And for that, you need some kind of like good memory concept. And then there's a second type of thing where you actually can get benefit from having multiple agents work on a project at once. And so this is harder because, again, it has like the sort of same problems that you have when multiple humans work on something
Yeah.
at once. It's like you have this organizational problem, you have communication overhead. I don't know if you ever have read Mythical Man Month, but it's like when you put more engineers on a project, it kind of goes more slowly. And so, it's a tricky thing to get right, but I do think there's real value in looking this year in terms of like, how do you have like more of a concept where multiple agents can work on something at once? I think it's not solved what the best pattern is for that. Meaning, like, do you have like a pattern where each agent on the team, kind of models like a human role? Like you have a designer agent and a PM agent and builder agents. I don't know if that's right. Another pattern is more like you have one leader who is sort of coordinating the rest of the agents. And at Warp with Oz, Oz is meant to be something that you can implement these different patterns on top of. So we're sort of agnostic to like what's the best multi-agent pattern, but all
Mm.
these multi-agent patterns need common primitives. They need the ability to run agents in the cloud. They need some way of passing messages between them. They need some sort of shared persistent memory concept and a task list. So we're building out those primitives, and then we will build some opinionated take on what's the best way to do this. But I think the smart thing to do at the moment is just like build flexible systems for people who want to try different ways of having agents coordinate.
Yeah, and you talked about the lines of
Oh,
communication
here we go.
and
Yeah.
things. Yeah, it's just kind of yeah. So I was actually
Yeah,
talking about
exactly.
this
It's
with our team the other day, but like for those listening, it's showing size of team, 3-person team, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 14. But in a 3-person team, you literally have 3 lines of communication. It's very simple because you have 3 people that can talk to each other. But as you start to grow, it turns into this weird, I don't even know how to describe it, like polygon looking. It's like one of those, do you remember those games where you'd stick the pencil in the little hole and you go around in a
yeah, I love
circle? It
that.
starts to look
What were
like
those
that.
called? Yeah, those are fun. It's
Uh,
like
but like a
spirograph or
14,
whatever. Yeah.
like a 14-person team now has 91 potential lines of communication. And that's why you naturally, to your point, experience, you get confusion. It's like this um, overhead that's on it, but I guess it still applies with agents technically because they're things doing tasks at the end of the day.
Totally. That's why it's like, human organizational design, I think, doesn't favor organizations that are entirely flat like this. Like, I think the way that you start to limit this in human organizations is with hierarchy, essentially. So you divide things into more of a tree rather than like a fully connected graph like that. And that's what I mean. Like, I don't know what the best of these patterns is going to be, but they all are going to have downsides. And, the upside is basically multi-threading. Like you can have
Mhm.
multiple streams of like you just don't want like one person doing all the work at a company. It'll take forever.
Yeah.
So from a like throughput perspective, I think that there's real potential advantage, but it comes with solving this coordination problem that's a pain.
Yeah.
And agents already are really bad at like losing context and losing the thread and like so it's not a trivial problem to solve.
Totally. All right. So to wrap it up, I got 2 questions for you. So what's
Yeah, sure.
what's the thing that's you're most excited about that you think most people are not paying attention to yet? And it can't be the local to cloud with agents like we talked about at the beginning. It's got to be something else.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's just this like style of work where if you need to do something, you are telling an agent to do it, or you are looking at a thing that you are repeatedly doing and having an agent automate it. And just
Yeah.
the ability of like not having to do annoying repetitive shit at work,
Mhm.
if everyone can learn how to automate those parts of their job, I think that's like super exciting. Like I would
Yeah.
rather spend my time thinking about creative stuff than I would about like what do I do? I don't know. It's like looking at different websites, trying to see what our competitors launched, trying to like bring that all into a Google Doc and then like try like I don't want to do that. I just want that done and then I just want to consume it and think about it. And so looking for opportunities where for where you're not like using like your traditional SaaS, but instead you're just like automating parts of what you want to do by having helpful agents do it. Seems pretty cool. I'm excited for that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't realize how many repetitive things they do in a day until you
Oh my
actually
God.
like audit what you're doing. Like the stuff I do for this podcast, and I've started to automate different parts of it, but it essentially follows the same flow. Like
Yeah.
identify a guest, have a prep session with them, prep myself for it, do the podcast. There's like the sequence of things
Yeah,
that need to be done, and you can automate that.
you should have an like I don't know if you had an agent do like research on me. I would certainly do that. Have it set up the
Yep.
calendar invites. Have it, try to like make an app in Warp and demo it. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
stuff that these agents are capable of. that I don't even think people are thinking in that way yet, but they're
Yeah.
gonna, because it's gonna be possible.
Yeah. It is a different way of thinking. All right. So, last question for the developer listening right now who's still resistant. Maybe they've
Yeah.
tried tools 6 months ago, they weren't impressed, they've written it off. Uh, they're uncomfortable with this shift. What would you tell them?
Yeah, I would go with like a positive message here, which is like a lot of engineers on our team, Warp, and we're building an AI tool. I think kind of felt this way maybe
Yeah.
6 months ago. Um, and what's gotten them to change their work style is just the realization that it's actually pretty fun to use these tools, and that there's actually a lot of skill in them. Like,
Yeah.
it's far from replacing you as an engineer. It's making you learn a whole new way of building as an engineer. And now, like, some of the more senior engineers on our team are the ones who are like best at this and setting the best practices and being like,
Yep.
here's how you plan, here's how you prompt, here's like how you do the architecture. And so it can be fun. It's far from replacing engineers. I like hate that meme. I think it's like but it is forcing them to learn a whole new way of working. It's forcing me to learn a new way of working. Like, when I build with these things, I'm not really coding anymore, but I'm like doing it poorly a lot of the time and need to get better at it. Like, otherwise
Yeah.
I'm just like going in circles with the thing. So it's pretty fun. It would be my positive message to people who haven't adopted it yet.
Yeah. It's like how I led in the beginning. Like we have people on our team that haven't written a line of code in multiple months, but there's this, and I think of this one particular person in my mind. They have like
Yeah.
this new excitement to them, like this new, like kind of glimmer in their eye now that they
Yeah.
have this new way of working, and a lot of the like drudgery that was involved in engineering and writing code, they've been able to, use AI to help do some of the painful stuff. So definitely interesting there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So last thing, where can people find Warp and Oz? How do they find you, I guess, if they want to test it out and learn more?
Yeah. See, you can get Warp at warp.dev. You can get Oz at oz.dev. It's also, they link to each other. You can go to either one. If you want to reach me, I am increasingly active on Twitter. I'm trying to do that at Zach Lloyd tweets. And then I have probably a bigger following on LinkedIn. I post a lot of stuff about like what's going to happen with development, specifically around like agentic development for business people who are looking at that. So those are the two good spots.
Awesome, Zach. Well, appreciate you jumping on and talking some AI.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you so much for having me. A lot of fun.
Thanks for listening to the Talking AI podcast. If you enjoyed the show, give us a follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to leave us a review. We love those. For more info on Talking AI, visit talkingaipodcast.com.